Sorry. It will just be myself recorded and any other colleagues. So you as a participant won't be recorded at all. So just to allay any concerns anyone might have, but it means that you can revisit the content at your leisure after the session. Please do give a bit of grace for the recording to be sent around as well, because it does take a little bit of time to get it sent to you. So it won't be immediately sent after the session, but it will be sent in the following week or so. Please also remember the online code of conduct and all of the expectations that are outlined in that document that was sent to you when you signed up to the webinar. It does ensure that we all create a safe, positive space this evening. So please do bear that in mind and conduct yourself accordingly when you're in the virtual space. This session, as I said, is for students who are hoping to get an interview for intake for the September intake next year. So you'll be expecting to have your interview in the autumn or winter, all the way through actually. Some universities interview up until April, May next year for their students to start in September. We did hold a session a couple of weeks ago for aspiring medical students. So if you're in the session and you have applied to medicine, there will be lots of relevant information in the session, but it will not be as tailored as the previous session that was held. So if you would like or prefer to have the medicine session recording, either instead of or as well as this, you can contact our team via wp@sgul.ac.uk, which I'll just put in the chat for you. And that way you can send an email requesting that session. So there'll be a couple of things that we won't cover in this session that we would have in the medical session, things around like medical ethics, for example. But like I said, lots of the content, well, all of the content in this session will still be very, very relevant and very helpful for you if you are applying to medicine. There's just a few distinctions there. I'm just going to put that in the chat for everybody at the moment. Brilliant. And just a couple of introductions then before we get started with the content. So my name is Alice. I'm the Widening Participation Manager for Post-16 students at City St George's Tooting campus. I run sessions and activities such as this one to support and help young people to make informed decisions about their future. It's so lovely to have you all here this evening. Thank you for carving out time to join for this session. I will hand over to Kirsty for a quick introduction as well.
Hi everyone, I'm Kirsty Allen. I'm Head of Student Recruitment and Widening Participation here at our Tooting campus.
Brilliant. Thank you, Kirsty. I'll come to Zainab next and then Elishba.
Hey, my name's Zainab and I am a third year paramedic science student.
Brilliant. Thank you. And Elishba? Is your tech working, Elizabeth? Sorry, you're on mute at the moment. It's just that little microphone unmute button. If I can ask you to unmute there, that'll work. Okay, in the interest of us moving on with the webinar, Elishba is a therapeutic and radiography student. And what year are you in, Elishba? You can numerically show if that's easier. Third year. Okay, brilliant. And we'll figure out how to get your mic working because we will need it as we go on with the session. Okay, we are going to use Mentimeter this evening because I don't want to just talk at you for the whole session. I want this to be interactive and engaging, and you'll learn more by inputting and sharing your thoughts as we go through. So we will do a couple of practice questions to get everybody on Menti and get a sense of how to use the platform if you've not used it before, but it's a great interactive feedback tool that helps you kind of give responses in real time to questions. So it'll be really helpful as we move through the session and explore practice questions in particular. So you can access the Menti by going to www.menti.com and inputting this code that is on the screen there, which I will also just put in the chat again for the moment. So that is 48743064. And it will take you to the slides that I prepared for this session. So I would be really grateful if you could share where you're joining us from, and then you can move to the next slide to share the healthcare course you've applied for, and the third slide you can move to share what you'd like to gain from today's session. So you can move through the slides at your leisure, but please just input answers when it's relevant and when you're sure what's being asked. So if you move all the way to the end, for example, you might not quite input the right information. So if you can follow the Menti as we go through, that would be great. Right, I'm going to go to Menti and I'll see if everybody has managed to input and share some thoughts so far. Brilliant. Thank you to those of you who kicked us off there. So lots from London, which is great to see. Essex, Bath, Croydon, yep. So more London, South London or Southeast London specifically. Wonderful. From Ireland, that's wonderful to see. Great to have someone a bit further afield joining as well. Australia, that's incredibly far. Wow. Amazing. Great. With Menti, you can keep inputting as well. So I always have a look through after the slides, after the session, sorry, to see what people put on the slides. So even if I skip past and you're still inputting your thoughts and responses, I will come back to those and have a look at them in my own time. So you're all very welcome. Thank you for joining from wherever you are joining from. So which course have you applied for? So we've got a few on here, a really good variety, which is great to see. So we've got pharmacy, speech and language therapy, nursing, occupational therapy, medicine, children's nursing, excellent, physician's associate, wonderful, physiological science. That's great. So a real breadth in the session tonight, which is great to see. And we will have lots of different questions that will touch on different areas and topics that will be applicable across the board as well, alongside some more specific suggestions of guidance that you can seek out to support you in your interview preparation. Excellent. Thank you all for inputting on that side. It's really helpful to know who we have in the virtual space with us. And then the next question is what you're hoping to gain from the session. So hopefully by inputting on here, when we come to the end of the session, if there's something else, that's something you inputted here that's outstanding and that we haven't got around to answering, then you can make sure that we get that answered for you by inputting it in the Q&A. So I'm just going to have a look at some of these. So being more confident, absolutely. We're hoping that you're going to come out of the session feeling more aware about what universities are looking for in your responses, and then in turn feeling more confident, especially having seen some more model answers, including what not to include in a response and what to include. And then we'll turn it over to yourselves as well to give input on questions based on what you've learned too. So it should give you a really good framework to work from when thinking about how to structure interview responses. Examples of questions, yeah, as I said, we'll definitely be exploring plenty of example questions. Support and insight about interviews, midwifery interview there. As I said, the interview guidance we give will be general, but it will be applicable across healthcare courses. Lots about feeling more confident, which is great. That's certainly something that we're hoping you will gain from this session. Improving your interview skills. Yeah, we're going to talk a bit about key things that you want to consider when you're giving an interview response. And like I said, you'll get to see some interview questions from our ambassadors as well. So you'll get to kind of critique and understand what a good response looks like and what a weaker response looks like as well. We will touch on MMIs as well. We will talk about MMIs and different types of interviews because there are different types of interviews across City St. George's and our two campuses. We do have different interview types that take place, and other universities as well have kind of a mixture or a blend of different interviews. So they might have MMIs, they might have panel interviews, they might be online, they might be in person. So we will talk about that different variety that you can expect, so that when you're doing your research, and if you're invited to interview or when you're invited to interview, you know what to look for and the different types of interview you could encounter. Brilliant. Types of questions. We will do a whole section. We'll have a lovely grid for you to see different types of questions that you might be asked specifically in relation to MMIs, but some of them will overlap with panel interviews as well. Okay, great. Frameworks for structures we will talk about as well. So it's great to see that a lot of the areas that you would like to have more knowledge and insights on will align with the content that we'll deliver in the session this evening. Okay, great. Thank you all for participating in the Menti. It does make it more engaging and it helps me understand what you're trying to gain from the session as well. So I appreciate you all getting involved with that. Okay, I'm just going to go back to our Sue. Bear with me just a moment. Okay, so as I said, a lot of the areas that you shared you would like to be covered will be covered in the session. So we're going to start by thinking about interviews and the mindset when we're approaching an interview. We will talk about different types of interviews and why and how universities use them. We will think about core skills and knowledge that a university is looking for you to exhibit and demonstrate. Then we're going to have some practice questions from our ambassadors so you can get a sense and a feel for how to structure interview responses and what you don't want to include in interview responses as well. Then we'll have some practice questions together where I'll give you the opportunity to share what you think you would include in a response to that question. So we'll do that by a mentee. And then we'll close the session with some tips from our current students and some final pieces of guidance as well. So first section, interviews and their role in the application process. So we're going to go back to mentee and we're going to answer this question, which is, what is your definition of an interview? So if somebody asked you how to define an interview, what would you say? What kind of things would you associate with an interview? What would your definition be? So I'm just going to go back to our mentee there. And let's see. Oh, brilliant. Everybody's really ahead of the game there. Thank you. So a conversation between two people where ideas are being shared. Yeah, that's a really lovely definition. Thank you for whoever inputted that. So it is a conversation sometimes between two people, sometimes between more people, but where you're sharing your thoughts and your ideas. Absolutely. A formal conversation. Yeah, it definitely does have that level of formality as you're being assessed for your suitability for a role. So it has got that level of formality in the conversation. People asking you questions. Yeah, absolutely. Questions about yourself. So yeah, it does center around you answering questions about yourself and your suitability, your experiences, reflecting on those, which we'll come on to later in the session. Brilliant. Yeah, bits more about suitability, which is great. Face-to-face meeting, it can be. Sometimes you can have interviews online. So you might have a remote panel interview or a remote multiple mini interview, which we'll speak about a bit later as well. Meeting where both parties explore the opportunity presented. Oh, opportunity is a great word there. We will come back to that. And yeah, a meeting between two people where one asks questions about a certain topic. Lovely. So we're all landing in a similar area, that it's this conversation. It's about assessing suitability. It's where you're sharing your experiences, your knowledge, your insight. Yeah, this one's great. Your time to shine. That lends us quite nicely to the next slide, which I'll go back to them. Thank you all for inputting there. Some really strong definitions of what an interview is. And what I've got here is complements a lot of what has been said on those slides, especially with your time to shine, and someone else mentioned the word opportunity as well. But an interview is an opportunity. And what I mean by that, I've got 3 images here that I'm just going to talk you through in relation to interviews as an opportunity and framing them in relation to that. Because when we approach interviews, we can think of them as quite nerve-wracking things, but actually interviews are an amazing opportunity. So you've got 3 images here on the screen. On the left here, we've got a politician. So politicians often come on talk shows or news shows in particular, and they want to give their sense or opinion on maybe something that's happened, maybe a policy that's been introduced. So it's an opportunity for them to come in and kind of talk to people, maybe control the narrative. In the middle here, we've got lots of different celebrities who are on a talk show, and usually celebrities are invited onto talk shows because they've got something to promote. So they might have a new book or a film or an album, and they're taking that opportunity to come on and promote that. And then lastly, we've got kind of a typical job interview. So as you can see here, you've got a candidate who's coming in and mirroring lots of the things that you suggested on Mentee earlier. So coming in, sharing their skills, sharing their suitability. And again, that is an opportunity. They're not randomly handed out, you're there on merit. And it's an opportunity for you to firstly think about whether it's the right fit for you, but also to show that you're a good fit for this workplace or this course, this university, this future career pathway as well. So hopefully that goes some way to just starting to think about how interviews, yes, they are formal conversations, everything everybody had said on that previous slide between you to show your skills, your suitability, but they're also an incredible opportunity for you to get to that next step and to take that next step to university and studying the course. So it's important to remind yourself of that when we're preparing for interviews and thinking about them. And like I said, although they can feel daunting, it's about seizing that opportunity to get to the next step on your journey. Brilliant. So we're going to move to the next slide then. So why do universities use interviews for student selection? So some universities, or most universities, for example, wouldn't interview for an English course or a maths course, but for healthcare courses, you can pretty much always expect to receive an interview. So why is it that universities interview for those healthcare courses? What does everybody think? So we're going to go back to Menti, and it'd be great to hear your thoughts on why you think universities interview in those situations for those courses when they don't for others. Brilliant. Everybody's so quick off the mark today. So why do universities use interviews to select students? Also love that someone's been honest there and said not sure. That's completely fine. So to ensure that students are aware of the course they've applied for and have the effective skills. Yeah, so we want to see that you've got good course knowledge and you can speak confidently about that at the interview, and also that you've got the skills required for that course too. To see if they've got what it takes. So again, looking at that suitability. Yep. Again, suitability has come up quite a lot here actually, which is great to see. Well, this one's a fantastic response. To see if their goals and values align with the course and the university. Values and values-based recruitment is something that we're going to come on to a bit later in the session. So that's really good to see as well. But yeah, checking that you've got the right values, checking that you've got the right mindset, finding out more about you. Yeah, brilliant. Really good responses here, everybody. Thank you. Lovely. Interpersonal skills in healthcare. Yeah, that's something that's really key because personal statements don't always show everything about you as a person. And that is a really key reason why universities need to get students in to interview for healthcare courses, because we can see lots about you from your UCAS application, your personal statement. We can see that academically you're on track and you've got a clear passion and motivation from what's been written in your personal statement. But we need to go beyond that and assess that in person, because we can only decipher and understand so much about you and your experiences and your passion and your motivation from that digital piece from UCAS and your personal statement. So that's the key thing. We can only assess so much on your application. We need to know more about you and meet you in person to really assess your suitability. So thank you all again for inputting on Menti there. So as a lot of you have said, universities use interviews for student selection for healthcare courses because we want to know more about your skills, your attributes, your experiences. We want to know what you think about healthcare and the NHS, which will be certainly where you'll train and likely for many of you, your future employer, at least for some period of time. And then within that, the NHS and its current challenges too. And we want to see that you've got relevant insights into the field so you understand the course and the career pathway, and you know more about the profession as well, which you can speak to in your interview, that you can link to your suitability as well. Okay, there are different types of interview that you can encounter. So you can have panel interviews, which is where you will have yourself sat there and you might have 2, 3 or 4 people sat the other side of the table, and they will usually take it in turn to ask an interview question to you. You'll give your response and then they will be writing down the different points and fantastic things you say to assess you on. And usually when we think of an interview, it's that kind of format that we typically associate with an interview. There are also multiple mini interviews, which someone had mentioned in the what you're hoping to gain from this session Menti slide. So they are abbreviated to MMIs, and they are used at lots of different universities. At City St. George's, we use them for lots of our healthcare courses as well. And they are an interview made up of a series of mini interviews, essentially. So you might have 6 stations, for example, and station just refers to question, essentially. So you will have 6 stations and you'll have a different assessor at each station. So you go to your first station, you'll be asked a question by the assessor, you'll give your response, they'll make notes in a similar way as they would to a panel interview, so they can review it and score you on your response. And then after the time has elapsed, on that station. You'll have a short rest, which is where you'll move to the next station, say a 60-second rest, move to the next station, and then a different assessor will ask you a question and you will give your response. They will write their feedback, give you a score, and so on and so forth until you've moved around all of the different stations in that circuit. And you'll get a total score, which will be a combination for all the individual scores at the different stations. But what makes MMIs that bit different is that all of your assessors are assessing you independently. So they don't know what another assessor has marked you or scored you. And that way it's very much how you perform on that station is the mark you receive on that station. So nobody confers, nobody knows if you've had a station where you don't feel like you did as well on, or if you've come away feeling like you've underperformed on a station, the next assessor you're going to doesn't know that. So it gives you a really great opportunity to brush yourself off and give yourself a bit of a boost and go again, knowing that even if you feel you've underperformed on one, that's not going to impact your whole experience. So within panel interviews and MMIs, both of those could be online or they could be in person. There's also structured interviews and semi-structured interviews. So structured interviews means that all of the questions are standardized and they are the same for every single candidate. So everyone will be asked the same question and, if applicable, the same follow-up. Semi-structured means that you would be asked the same starting question, but then depending on the response you give, say you mention some work experience you've undertaken, for example, or you've spoken about a book or something that you've read, then the assessor or the individuals on the panel may then start asking you a question based on the information you provided. So it has that variation compared to a structured interview where the questions are all the same and standardized. So interviews at universities are used in different ways depending on the institution. So sometimes they are the final stage of the admissions process and are used to decide who receives an offer. Sometimes they might be used as kind of cumulative point scoring pieces. So this is particularly relevant for medicine, for example, where they might be added to an admissions test score as well to paint a full picture. But usually they're the final stage of the process and they're the key piece that decides on whether you'll be offered a place at that university or not, providing you get your grades in the summer. If you're expecting an MMI, you need to be aware that they have a great deal of variety in structure. So universities will have different number of stations. So as I said, there are questions. The length of station will vary. So it could be 4 minutes, it could be 10 minutes. So that will impact also the overall interview length, and the types of question can vary from university as well. So lots of universities are quite transparent on their web pages. So it's always important to make sure you have a look, know what type of interview you are expecting. And sometimes they will share that you might have a group station, or you'll have a scenario question, or you'll have a group station and then an individual interview, which will make more sense when we look at the different question types. But like I said, there's lots of information available on universities' web pages. So what can that look like? So for City St. George's, for example, I've divided it into Clerkenwell campus and Tooting campus and the healthcare courses that we offer across both of those. So already you can see there's a bit of variety there. So for our nursing courses, it's an online interview and it does have a group assessment. Our midwifery course has an in-person MMI with 4 stations. Speech and language therapy has an online MMI. And then at our Tooting campus, we have lots of in-person MMIs largely for our courses. And then across the course that's shared for both campuses, which is diagnostic radiography and therapeutic radiography, that's an online panel interview. So already you can see that all of the courses, or lots of the courses, have variation in the types of interviews that they hold. And all of the information, so I've got a couple of other examples for different universities to show that variety. And all of that information is correct as of November this year. But make sure you do double check if you're invited to interview, so you have the up-to-date correct information when you're invited. So that's what it can look like at City St. George's. And then for University of Sunderland, just as another example, they can be in person or online. You can see again their nursing courses at MMI. For midwifery, they also have group activity and they have an MMI. Paramedic science, they have a group task and an individual interview. And within that, they give a bit more information about what the group activity could look like. So they share that it would be speaking about an understanding of different challenges in healthcare. And with the MMIs, there could be 3 to 6, depending on the course. So there's lots of variety already within that institution. And then for Canterbury Christchurch, again, accurate as of November. Today, when I checked, all of theirs take place online. They're 30 minutes conducted by 2 interviewers. They have a big emphasis on values-based recruitment, which we will look at in a bit more detail when we talk about what to include in your interview responses. But values-based recruitment aligns with the NHS values, as I said, where you'll be training, likely your future employer for many of you. And they want to ensure that you embody and can demonstrate the values of the NHS in your responses. So questions will be linked to the NHS values, which we'll again cover in a moment. And also the 6 C's of care for their nursing courses. So they also advise applicants to check out the values linked to their chosen profession and the kind of guidance from professional bodies as well, which they link on their web pages too. So like I said, lots of variety across different institutions. It's just to demonstrate what you could see and that there is lots of distinctions and variety across different universities. So very important to know what to expect and read all the guidance that they provide you with. Okay, so what to include in your responses. We're going to look at firstly different types of MMI stations. Several of these will be valuable, whether it's an MMI or a panel, for example. Some would be likely more specific to MMI. So let's just have a look at the grid of different stations. So I'll walk you through all of these. So don't be alarmed if they look a bit overwhelming, the different number of them that are on screen. The first one is core competencies and motivations. So this would be something you'd expect in MMI. It'd be something you would expect at a panel as well. So you'll be asked to demonstrate your motivations and examples of where your skills align with key competencies. And reflection is really key here. So we're going to talk about reflection a little bit later in this section. But core competencies and motivations would be, why do you want to study this course? What makes you suitable to study this course? Why would you want to study this course over another course? What makes you passionate about insert course or subject? So those kind of typical motivation type questions, which is certainly a response that everybody should be prepared for at an interview and have an understanding of what it is why you want to study that course and what makes you suitable. NHS and career insights, so questions about or stations such as these assess your knowledge and understanding of the profession, the NHS, current challenges, and the roles of those who work within it. So that you might be asked to speak about something specific to the NHS or the career itself to show that you've got that knowledge and insight. You might find it helpful as well in preparation to be looking at BBC News, the health section, for example, to see what's going on in the NHS or if there's anything pertaining to your profession in particular. Role play stations, these would be more likely in an MMI circuit. So they involve an actor and you responding to this scenario with an actor. So we will do an example of a role play station later, but they usually assess your ability to handle difficult conversations. So you would have to get into character and respond to the actor there and go along with whatever information you've been given. Really key with role play stations is to take them seriously. And like I said, they're often about handling difficult conversations. They might be demonstrating whether you exhibit certain skills to help and support people, demonstrate empathy as well, for example. Prioritization stations, which would be more of an MMI. They're designed to test your ability to make quick decisions under pressure and be able to justify that. So your decision-making process and why you've made that decision. So behavioural stations are very typical interview style questions. So they are, tell me about a time when you've ... And they'll usually be connected to different skills that they want you to exhibit so that you can demonstrate you possess those skills and you've got a strong example of when you have done just that. So tell me about a time when you've been resilient, tell me about a time when you've been empathetic, and that would be where reflection again is really key, which as I mentioned, we will speak about in greater detail, but having good structure, having examples that you've pre-prepared to connect to those key skills so that you can easily speak to those and give a lovely, well-structured answer is key there. Group stations, and as you'll recall, when we just looked at those different university examples, lots of universities kind of use them there, group stations. So something that you may encounter, but again, some universities will be very specific about whether you can expect one of those, so make sure you check. They assess your ability to work together as a team, your ability to communicate, leadership skills, being able to be collaborative as well. There might be some kind of task that you need to do, or it might be a discussion as well. So it could be either of those. Scenario stations, you'll be presented with a scenario. Sometimes it'll be a clinical scenario, sometimes it might not be, and you'd be expected to outline how you would approach and respond to that scenario using your insights into the role, including kind of duties, professional conduct, and exhibiting different skills and values, NHS values. So there's lots of variety there. And like I said, some of those would lend themselves more to MMI or panel. They're all different types of MMI stations, but some of them you wouldn't necessarily expect at a panel interview. Like I said, they're all MMI stations. And they could be stations that are used, there's variety in the stations that are used depending on the different universities. So it's worth having a look and seeing if the university specifies which stations or question types they use as well. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, but it's good to have an awareness of all of them. So next on my list are different core competencies. So these are different skills that, broadly speaking, you would need to become a healthcare professional. They're kind of recognised as the soft skills required to be a healthcare professional. And questions that are asked during interviews will consider these, and hopefully there'll be an opportunity for you to demonstrate that you possess these and you've exhibited them before using relevant examples. So this is not an exhaustive list. It's always good to check specifically in relation to the profession that you're pursuing. There's other different skills that are highlighted and spotlighted, but being empathetic, caring, being a good communicator, being able to work as part of a team, which is really key for healthcare, having good scientific knowledge of biology and of the human body, having compassion, being well organized, being resilient, so being able to bounce back, particularly after challenging circumstances or situations, and having a commitment to the course and to healthcare as well. Like I said, not an exhaustive list, but certainly a strong starting point for a list of skills that we're looking for in future healthcare professionals. Okay, so we've also got, that was meant to come up afterwards actually. I meant to have that as a mentee. So these are the NHS values, and if you don't know them, that's okay. There's still plenty of time for you to get familiar with them, but they are the values that everybody in the NHS should adhere to and subscribe to when you're working as part of the NHS. So they're taken from the NHS Constitution. And like I said, they are, when we speak about values-based recruitment, universities will look to have questions. If they say they use values-based recruitment, they'll have questions that connect to and give you the opportunity to speak to and demonstrate that you possess these values. So like I said, if you don't know them, there's plenty of time to get to know them, but do make sure you read up about them and you're confident about them and you're able to demonstrate that you understand them or that you exhibit them in your interview responses. And then we've also got here the 6 C's of care, which are care, competence, courage, commitment, compassion, communication as well. So they're similar to the above regarding the kind of quality and priorities of care that individuals in the NHS should embody, and how we can strive together to deliver excellent care within the NHS. So again, helpful to know and be aware of and be able to speak to and demonstrate an awareness of in your answers, and also that you possess these skills too. Okay, professional codes of conduct. So every healthcare profession will have their own governing body that has created a professional code of conduct with expectations and behavioural pieces around how they expect everybody to conduct themselves and how everybody should behave and what everyone should aspire to deliver really good care. So for every single different professional body, as I've said, they'll have their own. So you can see the Nursing and Midwifery Councils one on the right here. In the middle, we've got occupational therapy, and then we've got the Chartered Society of Physiotherapists on the left there. So just an example of a few of them, but certainly worth having a look into the relevant professional code of conduct for the course and profession that you're looking to go into, because there's lots of useful information there as well. It could be very helpful when you're preparing for your interview to think about the skills and other important pieces of information so that you can exhibit those again in your interview and speak to those. Reflection is something that I mentioned earlier. So we'll just have a quick overview of what reflection is. Brilliant. So it's really key that you're able to reflect well in your responses. So in each interview answer, you want to make sure you're outlining your suitability by reflecting on the experiences that you've had. So reflective practice ties together how you developed your skills and qualities, how they make you suitable for the profession. It's not just what you've done, but why you did it, what you learned, what you gained, and most importantly, how it makes you qualified to enter the field. So by reflecting really well, you can add value to what you're sharing with the interviewing team, and it does mean that you can demonstrate those different skills and how you've gained them when you've demonstrated them as well. So reflection really does help you to give a strong interview answer. And it's when you're giving your interview response, for example, where reflection helps you flesh out and give a strong answer, you could say, I've had work experience, or I've done some volunteering in a care home, for example. But if you just say that, it doesn't tell the interviewer anything more about what you've gained from that experience. But if you say, I've had work experience or volunteered in a care home, and I gained from that a really strong understanding of the importance of empathy. And then you give an example about where you saw empathy helping to support a resident, and it showed you just how key that skill is, and how to use that effectively to provide excellent care to patients and elderly people in the residential facility. And that will be something that you'll take forwards as a future occupational therapist, for example. You'll make sure you're very empathetic in your practice and your approach because you've seen the value of it. That shows the interviewer that you understand the importance of that skill, that you have learnt it in a context that makes sense, and that you understand its relevance so that you can use it moving forward. So it fleshes out, instead of just saying, I volunteered at a care home, you've actually showed and reflected on that experience to show the skills that you've gained. Okay, so our final piece, I know someone at the top said that they wanted to learn more about structure. So we're going to talk about STAR very quickly. So STAR is a structure that you could use. You may have another structure that you prefer to use, but this is the one that I'm going to walk you through very quickly. But so having a good structure helps you give a strong interview response. You want to make it as easy for the assessor as possible to give you the marks that they want to give you. So if you use this structure or a structure that you've got, it helps them to follow the journey and the story along, and makes it very clear what you're demonstrating in response. So having a structure, practicing responding with the structure will really help. So for STAR, for an example, we could use that one I just spoke about there with the care home. So you could say a behavioural question, tell me about a time when you've been empathetic, and you could talk about the situation. So you were volunteering in this care home, you were responsible for taking teas and coffees around to the residents, and you had a resident who was getting really distressed and seemed a bit upset. So what you did in that moment, you would talk about how you went over to them, you spoke to them, asked if they were okay, asked them if they would like a cup of tea, asked them if there's anything they needed, or offered some food or a biscuit. And it turned out actually they were feeling a bit overwhelmed and they just wanted to go back to their room. So in that moment, although you were in the middle of the tea round, you took them back to their room, made the effort to make sure that they were there and that they'd calmed down a bit and they felt a bit more comfortable. And the result was that they did calm down and they seemed a lot more stable and less stressed out now that they were back in their own environment. And it really showed you the importance and the value of empathy and trying to put people first, understanding what you can do in that moment to respond to them. And that's something that you would talk about in the relate section. So we've gone through task, action, result. You relate that back to your course and talk about how empathy is a really important skill, especially as people in healthcare, especially when you're caring for people in healthcare setting, they are often feeling stressed and emotional, and it's really important to be aware of that and take an empathetic approach to support them. And that's something that you will ensure you're doing in your future career as a physiotherapist. So as you see, we've kind of woven through there. I appreciate I've spoken to you about it in the third person, but you would talk about the different steps there through the STAR to show that you've got relevant insights through the experiences that you've had. And then with this panel on the left, before we look at some practice questions, ensure that your interview questions relate directly to the questions, your answers relate directly to the questions, sorry. So you don't want to be going off on too much of a tangent. You want to be making sure it's concise and clear and relevant to what you have been asked. In MMIs in particular, they are timed questions. So as I said, you'll have a set number of minutes to respond to a question, and then you'll have a rest station, then you'll move to the next station. So you've got a limited amount of time on each station, so make sure you make it count. Structure your answers as we've just done with that method in response to that questionnaire, the STAR method. Did that tell me about a time when question? They lend themselves really well to the behavioural questions. It helps you outline your suitability very clearly. And like I said, you might have another structure that works, but if not, hopefully that gave you a clearer idea of how to use STAR, because it's quite a helpful structure to employ. Okay, so a lot of information I appreciate in the first half of this session. What we're going to do now is we're going to look at some practice questions so that you can start to put that into practice and see more about the different pieces that we've spoken about in relation to how to give a good interview response. So I am going to ask our ambassadors to come back. Hopefully Elishva's microphone is working.
Yeah, it's working now. Sorry.
Brilliant, that's all right. Okay, so what we're going to do now then is we're going to do some practice questions, and the way this is going to work is our ambassador is going to take it in turn to ask and answer questions. We're going to do 2 practice questions. So Elishba is going to answer this question, I believe. Zainab's going to ask it, and we're going to do 2 rounds of this question. So we're going to do a take 1 and a take 2. And I want you to think about on the take 1, what sort of feedback you would give for this answer based on everything we've spoken about. We will go to Menti and you'll share your thoughts, and then we will come back together and see if any of that feedback can be taken on board for a second response that Elishba will give. So listen to what's being said, think about everything we've covered so far, and be prepared to share your thoughts on Menti. So Elishba and Zainab, I will let you both take the floor.
I'll ask the question. Why do you want to study this course rather than a different healthcare course?
I want to study this course because it's interesting and I want to help people. I also enjoy science-related subjects and want to work in a hospital environment.
Is there anything you'd like to add?
No, to help you all.
Okay, very short and sweet. I will move to the Menti then and just have a think about what kind of things Elishba said on that first go on that question. Brilliant. So we'll just wait for a few moments. So think about everything that was spoken about in relation to what would be a good interview response, and think about what kind of feedback would we give Elishba on that answer. Yeah, very short, no detail given. No examples, very vague, very generic. Yeah, there's going to be a common theme in interview responses that people, lots of people go into healthcare, so they want to help people, but that doesn't distinguish you and it doesn't show your suitability. So there were no examples given, there was no reflection given. There was a lot more that could be given in that answer that was lacking. So I think we can all agree, not a great first go, a lot that we need to flesh out in that answer. So thank you everybody for the feedback there. We will go back and based on that feedback, see if we can improve upon that answer. So I'll go back to Ashby and Zainab again. We'll have a second go.
So, why did you want to study this healthcare course?
I wanted to study radiotherapy and oncology because it allows meaningful patient interactions, similar to the ones that I've had before through volunteering at my local hospital. I also found that other healthcare courses wouldn't allow as much patient interaction as radiotherapy and oncology, and it will also allow me to directly contribute to cancer treatment while supporting patients both physically and mentally. Furthermore, radiotherapy integrates compassion with long-term patient care qualities that align strongly with my strengths and values.
Brilliant. Thank you, Elishbeth. Thank you, Zainab. So what we'll do is we'll go back to our mentee and we'll think about what was added and enhanced there in that response. Brilliant. I'll give you all a few moments. So have a think what was improved upon from the previous answer. Yeah, specific examples were included there, which is great. Better knowledge about the course, well, actually speaking about the course, and what it is that has made Elishbeth interested in that course. So speaking about the value of patient interaction, and speaking about volunteering as well, and how that's supported her interests. So we've got a bit more personal experience there. What stood out in the course? Yeah, great, really good submissions here, everybody. Talked about core values yet. Compassion is an NHS value as well. So that's a really great one to include as well, because it's both a skill that we'd expect, but it's also an NHS value. Wonderful. Excellent. And our own experiences there. Elishbeth, is there anything that you would like to add about your response there on the second time round?
I feel like it was way better, and just like everyone else has mentioned, a lot more detail and me linking to the NHS values and the 6Cs, which is what everyone should be doing in like their interview questions.
Brilliant. Thank you. Yeah, I would completely agree. Really important things to include. Like I said, in your actual interview, you'll be given a longer answer. We've just, for the purpose of this webinar, given slightly shorter ones. Otherwise, we'll have quite a lot to cover, but that should give you a sense of what was lacking in the first response and what has been improved upon to flesh it out and include lots of those key things that we spoke about in the session so far. Brilliant. Thank you everyone for your feedback. Thank you for your responses there, Elishbeth. We will switch now and I will ask Zainab to answer the question and Elishbeth to ask. So let me just move to my next slide, and everyone in attendance will do the same. So we'll have one response and give some feedback, and then we'll hear a second response and give some feedback. So Zainab and Elishbeth, over to you both.
Tell me about a time when you have been empathetic. Why is this skill relevant for your course?
So one time I was volunteering at A&E and there was this patient who was upset because she didn't really understand what was going on. She didn't speak much English and didn't have anyone with her. I tried to help her by talking a bit and realised we spoke the same language. So I just explained some things. After that, she was a bit calmer, left. I guess this shows empathy because I helped her and I listened to her. Empathy is important, I guess, to be a paramedic because it's about being respectful.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay, so we will go back to Menti and we'll think about what Zainab said in response there. What do we think? What feedback would we give based on everything we've spoken about so far? I think these are all from the previous ones, so I'm just going to leave those and make some new ones. Her response wasn't really empathetic. Yes, I don't think we quite got the definition down there of empathy. Yeah, I would agree. It didn't go into a huge amount of detail as well, yet there's certainly not more that could be said there. There was an example given, but it didn't really lend itself to the question and understanding a definition of empathy. Absolutely. Anything else? I think we've got the main points there. Essentially, we're looking for more in that answer. We're looking for more structure. We're looking for more of an understanding of empathy and being able to contextualize its relevance to the course beyond being respectful. So we will go back and we will have a do-over. And I will say we will be putting submissions on this slide that I've got up at the moment. So I will go back to the main slides and I will ask for a do-over there from Zainab in your response. So if you could roll the question again.
Tell me about a time when you have been empathetic. Why is this skill relevant for your course?
So during my time as an ED befriender volunteer at my local hospital, I supported a patient who was visibly distressed. She had no friends or family with her, and she spoke a different language and was struggling to understand her care plan. This lack of understanding was causing her significant anxiety. My role as an ED befriender was to provide emotional support, helping her feel safe and informed while ensuring she maintained her dignity throughout this interaction. I began by actively listening to her concerns and offering verbal reassurance, showing her that she was heard and not alone. And then as we began to build a rapport, I learned that we shared the same cultural background and language. So I offered to translate her questions and the clinician's explanations. This allowed her to fully understand her care plan and regain a sense of control. Throughout the interaction, I was mindful of cultural sensitivity and made sure she felt respected rather than being dismissed. And by bridging that communication gap, her anxiety noticeably reduced, and she was able to leave the department with clarity about her treatment. This experience reinforced to me that empathy extends far beyond the emotional support. It includes respecting people's backgrounds, being inclusive, and recognizing that distress often arises from feeling unheard. And I believe that empathy is fundamental in paramedic practice. We work with people from a diverse cultural background, and through active listening, clear communication, and cultural awareness, we help to build trust and ensure patients feel heard. And this experience taught me that empathetic care is not just about what we do, but how we approach people. Showing an appreciation for their unique differences allows us to make them feel empowered.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that response, Zainab. Very different from the first response, I think we'll all agree. So let's see what everybody else has said. So again, I think these ones at the top are probably from a previous question, but I think these at the bottom are very much in line with the feedback I would give. So really clear reflection on her own experience, yeah, absolutely, including skills that were developed, or in this case, empathy, how that was developed, the importance of that, why it's relevant for the course, a really clear, easy to follow response as well. Absolutely, I think that's been highlighted here as well. Really clear as well with regards to what you did to support the patient in that moment, to exhibit empathy, and within that as well, other skills we expect, you know, being compassionate, empowering patients, those different NHS values as well that within that. So compassion being one, you can see that Zainab clearly understands the importance of working together for patients, which is another NHS value. So yeah, really strong answer, really good structure, good understanding of empathy. Clear night and day. Zainab, is there anything you'd like to add about your response there?
I think one thing that I really would recommend is reflection. I think Alice hit the nail on the head. I think interviewers love it because it only shows that you're honest and it shows humility in your answer. So it goes beyond the perfect answer. They don't want a script. They want you to be honest and authentic.
Yeah, absolutely that. So being able to speak about your own experience in relation to your suitability, it does help you stand out, which I know a lot of people say, how do I stand out in my response? Reflecting on your own experiences, they're unique to you. What you feel you've gained from it is unique to you as well. And they do give you the opportunity to speak about your suitability and your skills, which hopefully you've seen really clearly in that response that Zainab gave there, which was really fantastic and strong response to this question. Okay, great. Thank you, Zainab. Thank you, Elishba, for your responses there. What I will do then is go back to our presentation, because what we're going to do now is move to give you all the opportunity to share your responses to some different questions and think about what you would include and how would you structure your response based on everything we've covered so far in the webinar today. So our first practice question, which is, why do you want to enter this profession and how are you suited to the course? So if I go to the Mentee, just think about what the interviewer is looking for in your answer, and from what we discussed today, how you would answer that question. So I'm going to give everybody a moment to give their responses. The 2 prompts are up there as well. Think about everything we covered. What kind of things would you look to include in this answer? Great. Thank you for whoever's kicked us off there. So what made this profession stand out to you? What experiences surrounding this profession do you have? What skills do you possess that link with this? And add some keywords to show off your knowledge. So yeah, we'd be looking for those skills, kind of weaving in NHS values as well. So yeah, that's a really good outline of different things you could look to include in this question. Thank you so much for offering that, whoever kicked us off. What experience led you to pick this profession? Yeah, so what it is that's motivated you and made you interested in the profession. I would give a small piece of advice with that, as sometimes people have very personal reasons that connect them to wanting to pursue a career in healthcare, which you're of course welcome to speak about in your response. Just ensure that you feel you can speak about it confidently and it won't derail you when you're giving your response, so you might get too emotional that you can't continue giving a response. So if you feel you're able to talk about it and you're comfortable talking about it, if it's quite personal, then you're welcome to, but just bear that in mind that you don't want to derail yourself mid-interview. Choice of career, ethics, emotional intelligence, communication, brilliant. So thinking about key skills that you might have that make you suitable for the course, reflecting on personal experiences. Yeah, absolutely. They're really key to include in this question, reflecting. You want to make sure that in this question, which is kind of a motivation question, if we think about that big grid we saw earlier, it's the perfect opportunity for you to give a really well-structured answer using that STAR method, thinking about the different skills that you want to exhibit. So reflecting on that and talking about why you are suitable for the course based on the experiences that you have had. So reflection is really key here. Good structure is really key here. Having a strong understanding of what motivates you to study this course and your suitability. Again, this type of question is something everybody should be prepared for their interview, being able to speak about your suitability and motivation. And like I said, reflecting, good structure, key examples that you can link to show your suitability. Yeah, thank you for whoever's added that. This interview would want the student to display a realistic understanding of what the course entails. So having an understanding and insight into the roles and responsibilities as well for the pathway that you're looking to pursue too. And again, linking that to your suitability and skill sets you have. Brilliant. Thank you for all the responses there. I think we've got that question down. So second one, think about the qualities of a good healthcare professional. Pick 3 and explain why they are important. So what kind of question is this? How would we approach it? And of the things we've covered in the webinar, what sort of things would you talk about? So we'll go back to Mentee. I'll give you all a moment to think about qualities that you might speak about and other things that you think are important to include in this question. So someone's kicked us off already saying the 3 skills they would pick are adaptability, empathy, and knowledgeable. Interesting. Thank you for sharing those. And again, if you are picking those 3 skills, or whichever 3 you're going to pick, you want to make sure that you've got relevant examples connected to each of those. So you want to think, these are the 3 I'm picking. And then in turn, one skill I think is really important is empathy. This is because being empathetic is, if we think about Zainab's response, being empathetic is really key to supporting patients. A time when I've demonstrated empathy or strong empathy skills is, and then you go into that nice STAR structure, situation, task, action, result, relate it back to the course, and then do the same for the next skill, being adaptable, and the next skill, being knowledgeable. So can you see how, again, this is a chance for you to reflect and show your suitability again. So you don't want to just list 3 skills. You want to then show how you demonstrate those 3 skills. Let's see what everybody else has put on the Menti. Being committed, compassionate, communication skills. Yeah, really great ones to select. Compassion is really good one too, because it's an NHS value as well. So it has that nice overlap. Effective communication, active listening. I love that people have started to give some descriptions as well as to why that's important. So being able to understand the service user if you're actively listening to them. Empathy for delivering bad news, effective communication, ensuring that patients understand their care and the next steps for their care. Brilliant. Great definitions, everybody. Like I said, the next step would be to then reflect and talk about a time that you've exhibited or demonstrated that skill. So the interviewer is not only confident that you know that that skill is important, but that you also possess it. And that's what makes you suitable for the course. But yeah, really great list of skills that have been shared there. Thank you, everybody. Brilliant. We'll move to our next question in that case. I think we've got a good grasp on that one. Okay, practice question 3. You are on placement and you notice a patient becoming increasingly confused and agitated. What do you do? So this is slightly different from those first 2 questions we've had that are more about core competencies and motivations. So we'll go back to our Menti. It'd be interesting to see what everybody thinks. So please have a moment to think about what your response would be. So we've got 2 conflicting here. We've got, this is a behavioural question and this is a scenario-based question. And I can see how you might think it'd be a behavioural question because it's asking you how you would behave, but actually it's a scenario-based question. So a reminder, those behavioural questions are more, tell me about a time when, and they're asking how you've behaved in previous situations. So you've got a chance to think about those key skills that you want to demonstrate. So they're the tell me about a time when. This is a scenario because it's giving you this fictional scenario that you are on a placement, you notice a patient being confused. What do you do? So yes, whoever said scenario, that is absolutely correct. So what kind of responses have we got? What kind of things would you do if you were asked this in an interview? What kind of options would you offer? So comforting them, asking them what's wrong in a calm tone, using positive body language, absolutely. So being open in your body language, trying to give them eye contact, you know, trying to give them space at the same time, especially if they're agitated. If something is wrong, seeking advice from an educator or colleague. Yeah, really good suggestions there. Absolutely great options to suggest. You want to make sure that you are there, that you're being calm, that you're asking for support from colleagues if you need it, but that you are engaging with the person and, you know, trying to find a resolution, showing that you're empathetic, showing that you're compassionate, showing that you embody those NHS values. Brilliant. Ask them calmly. Yep. Being comforting. Yep. Brilliant. Trying to make them feel safe, but also knowing that you can ask someone else for support. Seems to be a real theme in the responses given here, which is great. But yeah, essentially we're looking to see that you embody those NHS values and those skills that we'd be looking for you to exhibit. So recognizing that this is something that you want to try and provide support with in a safe, comforting way, and asking for additional support from colleagues as needed as well. So yeah, really great responses here, everybody as well. Again, this is assessing, are you suitable? Do you have the right qualities we'd look for in a healthcare professional? But yeah, really good suggestions. Well done, everybody, and well done for identifying it is a scenario-based question as well. Okay, our 4th question we will come on to. How do you build trust with a patient? Why is this important for a healthcare professional? So have a think again, what kind of question this might be, how you would answer it. What would you look to include in your response there? We'll go back to Menti. So how do you build trust with a patient? Why is this important for a healthcare professional to do? Brilliant. Thank you for whoever's kicked us off there. So trust encourages honest communication, improves treatment adherence, reduces anxiety, helps create a supportive environment for better recovery. So we've really framed why it's important for healthcare professionals in relation to delivering good care. How do you build trust with the patient? By being present, using eye contact, open body language, so you're not having your arms crossed or looking away, listening to their concerns, letting you know that you've heard them, make them feel seen and not dismissed. Yeah, absolutely. Some really key suggestions here that we would expect if you're trying to build trust with a patient. Being empathetic, ensuring care is holistic as well. Yeah, holistic care is really key as well. So tailoring it to the person and their needs and recognizing everybody as an individual. And there's not a one size fits all. We want to treat everybody as individuals and provide the best care we can with that in mind. Brilliant. Carrying out person-centered approach. Yeah, that's another really great phrase that kind of ties to holistic care, taking a person-centered approach. Fantastic. Effective communication, listening. Yeah, so that theme of listening, active listening, really important. Making them feel safe and secure. Yeah, absolutely. Being open and respectful. So lots of great responses here. And again, in a question like this, all of these things you've said are really fantastic. You could also look to include an example here. So reflecting on the time you've maybe seen this in healthcare, or a time when you've been able to exhibit these skills as well to show that you understand how to employ them. And that's something you could take forward to your role as a future healthcare professional. So thinking about that STAR structure. So if you think about all of the things you said about how you build trust, and then why is this important for a healthcare professional, you can talk about it in relation to the role, and then also demonstrate that you exhibit and possess those skills by reflecting and using a STAR structure as well. So again, linking back to everything we've covered in the webinar so far. But yeah, really fantastic suggestions to include on how you would build trust with a patient. Thank you, everybody, for those. Like I said, hopefully that's clear. So you talk about all of these different things that everybody has shared, and then how it's important, or why it's important for the profession. You would frame it in relation to the role of the professional and your understanding, and then start to give an example of how you've demonstrated some of these skills or observed them in action, and how you would use that to take it forward in your practice and your studies as you train in this healthcare pathway you've chosen. Okay, we're nearly coming to the end. I know there's a lot of practice questions, but hopefully it gives you a sense of variety in what you could expect in your interviews. So our next, you're a healthcare assistant, a patient is upset because they've been waiting a long time to be seen. They raise their voice, they say, "This is ridiculous, I've been waiting for over an hour." You are the healthcare assistant. How would you respond to this patient? So think about that grid of different question types that we looked at earlier, and we'll go back to the Menti and have a think about what type of question this is, and then what it's testing and how you would respond. So it'd be great if anyone could tell me what type of question. Yes, fantastic. Someone's got there already. It's a role play station. So like I said, if we think about that grid of MMI questions, you could in an MMI expect to receive a role play question potentially. And it is that acting station where you'll be given this piece of information. And within MMI, you'll usually know it's a role play station because you'll have 3 people at that station, yourself included. You'll have the actor, and then the assessor who's sat next to the actor, and then obviously yourself, which would be the 3rd person there. And you'll have that information, and then the station will start, and you will need to respond with the information that you've got, and be prepared that the actor will bend and weave with you depending on the response that you give if you have a role play station, which is why it's really important to do your best to get into character and to take them seriously. Because if, for example, you break character and you laugh, the actor will say, "Why are you laughing at me?" So it's just important to note that if you're in that role play station, if you do think you're going to laugh, for example, or something, because we can feel like that when we're getting a bit awkward, or in a situation we're not familiar with, just take a glass of water. There's usually water at MMI station, so you can have a glass of water and just breathe and then reset. So just another piece of guidance for you with those kind of stations. But yeah, absolutely, as someone has identified, this is a role play station. It's testing your ability to see how you handle a difficult conversation. And as Sophia said, avoid laughing, take it seriously. It's a chance to demonstrate that you can handle a difficult situation, which is often what these types of questions can be testing. So you want to make sure that you're responding and taking responsibility, saying, you know, sorry for the delay, trying to calm down and diffuse the situation, and apologize, as somebody said there. Yeah, absolutely. Show that you're understanding, they're frustrated, acknowledging that. Yeah, all really good suggestions. Yep. Yeah, really good suggestions here, everybody. Showing compassion, showing understanding. Yeah, so great. And like I said, this, if it's an MMI station, it could be 4 minutes, it could be a little bit longer, but you know, just trying to follow all the guidance that's been given here, which is excellent. Like I said, getting into character, taking it seriously, apologizing, trying to diffuse the situation, trying to offer any solutions you can. Brilliant. Excellent. Okay. Great responses there, everybody. I think that might be all of our practice questions now. So we've covered a lot in all of those practice questions, but like I said, hopefully that's given you a chance to understand how you would use a lot of the guidance that we've explored in the first half of the webinar to give strong, structured responses that help you demonstrate your suitability and that you embody the NHS values and that you're a great fit for the course. So we're going to move to our final section, which is about some advice for you, some guidance and some final resources. So I'm going to invite our ambassadors back again. And we're just going to have a few moments to ask and answer some of these questions. So Zainab, I'm going to ask you what your experience of interviewing for your course was.
So my interview wasn't too bad. I interviewed for all of my university options, and some were online, some were recorded, and also some were in person. And to prepare, I definitely got familiar with the key competencies of our regulatory body. So as a paramedic, for me, it was the HCPC. So I looked at their professional standards, and then you can utilize those frameworks and then weave them into your answer. So you just don't want to be name dropping them. You just kind of want it to be seamless and natural. And if there's anything I'd wish I'd known before your interview, is probably coming in a bit more prepared around research. I think sometimes there can be questions on like research, and like Alice mentioned, looking around BBC Healthcare News, and research something that interests you, because at the end of the day, you're going to have to recall that, you're going to have to say that to your assessor. So for me, I loved understanding about mental health, so I researched stuff about mental health funding, and then that also shows that you've got NHS insight. And then specific advice for City St George's is utilize the breaks, because you get breaks in between the stations. So just breathe, relax, and always know that you're going to your next station with a clear framework. Someone new is assessing you, and that's typically with the MMI structure. So yeah, that's what I would say in terms of my experience.
Brilliant. Thank you so much there, Zainab. And like I said, you interviewed for paramedic science at City St George's, so that is that MMI structure. So like you said, having a rest in between, which you get with MMI circuits, really utilize those to the best of your ability, and really great guidance there about the professional standards, professional guidance document for paramedic science as well, having a look at that, what it says about conduct and expectations too. It's a really helpful tool, which I'd recommend everyone having a look at for their relevant professional body. Lovely. I'll go to Elizabeth for the same set of questions.
My experience was similar to Zainab's, so it went pretty smooth. What I did to prepare, I actually did some reading around like my topic and my course. So whether that was going on BBC News and like to the healthcare and like the science section, and just seeing what the current research was, any studies, or if there were any advancements, because radiotherapy is like a really advancing topic. So it's like every couple of months we have new research coming in. So it's just staying up to date with everything. So I knew what to say and like how to go about some of the questions when they did ask about any research. If there's anything that I wish I'd known before my interview was take a deep breath. As like you're meant to take deep breaths, but it gets like kind of nerve-wracking and it's harder to take deep breaths in between questions. But also knowing that you can, once the assessor has asked a question, you don't have to answer straight off the bat. You can take a moment to pause, think about the question. You can even ask them to repeat the question before you actually answer. And that would also be my advice. Take your time with it. And that's it.
Brilliant. Thank you, Elishba, as well, for your advice. I think that's a really important piece to end on as well, to breathe and take a moment when you're asked a question. You can give yourself a moment to collect your thoughts before you answer, because chances are if you just immediately start speaking, you're not going to have thought about the structure and the key things you want to include in your response. So give yourself a moment to think, right, I've been asked a behavioral question. It's telling me about a time when you've demonstrated good communication skills. Okay, great. So I need my star structure. I know what example I'm going to connect to good communication because I prepared that. And I've got examples connected for different skills so that I can speak to those with ease. And then you're ready to go because you've already done that preparation in advance. But giving yourself a minute to breathe, collect your thoughts before you dive straight in will stand you in much better stead to give a good, well-structured answer. Brilliant. Thank you, ambassadors, for your thoughts there. So final thoughts, which lends exactly what Elishba's just said. Don't be afraid to take your time. If you're not sure, ask for a moment, or you can ask the assessor to repeat the question as well. Be confident in yourself when you go into an interview. Everybody is there on merit, so remind yourself of that. Universities and assessors all want you to do well. They want you to give great responses. They want to come away giving you good scores and ultimately be able to offer you a place. So bear that in mind when you go into your interview. If you're at an MMI, use the rest breaks, as Zainab said, take a drink of water, recharge, reset, try and push the previous question out of your mind so that you're fresh and ready for your next MMI. Remember to be courteous, regardless of the type of interview you're having, introducing yourself to each interviewer, thanking them for the question, following the station, really key, really sets a great tone and makes a good impression. And finally, being yourself, which is a cliche, but it's true. And like I said, we often get asked what makes me unique or stand out, what makes my answers unique and makes me stand out. And that is the experiences you've had and how you reflect upon them and how you've used them to demonstrate your suitability for your chosen course. So all of that ties into you being yourself and giving you that uniqueness in your responses and giving good responses as well. So reflection really is key. Okay, so what would we advise you do next after this session? So practicing questions wherever you've applied as well. If you're expecting an MMI, this is really key. So if you have applied somewhere and you know you've got an MMI, if you get an interview there and the questions will be 4 minutes long, for example, start trying to do some practice questions and speaking to 4 minutes, because it can often be the case that you start trying to give your response and you realize you've got half the time still left. So getting used to what it feels like speaking for the requisite amount of time for the MMI station, if that's what you're expecting, will really stand you in good stead to know how much to include in your answer and what kind of structure you're looking for and how much time you can spend on various different bits and pieces and questions. So practicing is really key, regardless of the type of interview format you're going to have, be that MMI or panel. And like I said, speaking in a timed format is really helpful for MMIs when you're doing practice. Something that might make your skin crawl is recording yourself responding to questions and watching them back, but that is a really helpful tip, because if you can record yourself responding to questions and watching them back, you can see how your responses are, how you present yourself, what your structure is like. Are you staying on track? Are you going off on tangents? Are you using filler words a lot, ums and pauses or like? Something that you might want to brush up on, and the more you practice, the more you'll be able to give coherent responses that don't depend on filler words. So that'll be something that you pick up on if you record yourself and watch yourself back. Also, if you're expecting a remote interview, so when you record your responses, or if it's on Teams as well, recording yourself and watching yourself back again will show you how you'll present in that format too. So again, it will just allow you to critique yourself and understand what you're doing well and what to improve upon. Something that hopefully has been really clear throughout this webinar is the importance of the NHS values. Lots of universities use values-based recruitment for their healthcare courses. So understanding the NHS values, showing that you can weave them into responses and that you can exhibit them as well when you're thinking about experiences you've had and reflecting on those. Like I said, if you're not familiar with them, there's still plenty of time. Reviewing the key skills needed for your course and your profession, so you can connect these with examples you can reflect on. So like I said in the previous slide, thinking about being a good communicator, for example, if you were speaking about that, you would have that experience connected, ready to go. So that you think, right, if I'm going to be asked about good communication skills, or if that's something I want to speak about, I've got this example of when I was mentoring younger students and helping them with their maths homework. And I can talk about how that's made me a really good communicator and why that's an important skill for my future profession pathway. So thinking about key skills you need, we talked about empathy, compassion, communication, honesty, lots of different ones we spoke about on that kind of core competencies page or slide, and thinking about examples that you've got connected to those will be really beneficial, so that when you go into the interview, you know what you can pull upon to structure your response. And reviewing reputable sites. So we talked a lot about the BBC News health section. It's very much worth keeping an eye on that, so that you know about any developments going on for the NHS or your specific field of healthcare, in the event that you're asked to speak about any current issues or challenges, or your knowledge of developments, for example. It will help you have a more robust understanding of your profession. Okay, I would be hugely grateful if you were able to go back to Menti and share how you found today's session. It's on the same set of slides we've been working throughout, but it does help me understand what has been helpful from the session and what can be improved in future. I'm just going to have a look at the Q&A and see if there's anything that is still open to be answered. There's some that are specifically about midwifery. That will be something that you'll need to look at on the websites of the universities you've applied for midwifery. So if you can't find the answer on there, you can always contact the admissions team for that university as well to ask them about that. But I'm afraid I can't tell you off the top of my head, because I wouldn't know which university specifically you're looking for information on. If there are any other questions, please do ask them. Brilliant. I think we've covered all the questions we've got, except for those two about midwifery. And like I said, for different types of MMI stations for midwifery interview and how long the interview for midwifery is. If that is in relation to City St George's, I would have a look on the web pages. And like I said, you can always contact the interview teams and they'll share the information they're able to. So they might not be able to specifically say what the MMI stations will be, but they could tell you broadly how long the interview might be, or the length of the interview stations if it's an MMI. If I have any further questions, yeah, so there's an email address on the slide there, which is wp@sgul.ac.uk. So please do send any questions there, and we'll advise and respond to those where we're able to. Brilliant. How quick can I expect to receive an interview after submitting an application? That will depend on the university that you've applied to. So I would again have a look on their interview section of their web pages, or you can always email their admissions or interview team to ask them about when you can expect to hear back. But usually they will say on their web pages when candidates can expect to hear back as well. So again, contact the university you applied to directly and they should be able to advise there. Okay, brilliant. I think then that is everything. For clinical pharmacology doesn't interview at City St George's, so you won't have an interview for clinical pharmacology. So that hopefully answers that question there. Clinical pharmacology and biomedical science, both at the Tooting campus of City St George's, don't interview. So there we go. Is it possible to reschedule interviews if you can't attend on a certain day? I believe we do give some flexibility there, but I'm not 100% sure about how that works in practice if you're unable to attend. Kirsty, I don't know if you know about that. If not, I might advise you to ask our admissions team or look for some guidance on our website.
Yeah, I would definitely advise if you're unable to attend that you reach out to the admissions team to understand what the options are in terms of rescheduling.
I'm just going to put 2 different emails there for the team. I know there's information about that on the interviews webpage, so I'd have a look there. Could you possibly get a question regarding why you chose City St George's? I can't specify what the questions could or could not be for this university, so I can't really answer that. All I can say is that you should be prepared and have a good understanding of your motivations for studying and understanding of the course and the career pathway and the university. Yeah. And like I said, we can't specifically say what the questions would be. Okay, I think we will wrap it up there. Just a couple of minutes early, give everybody a few more minutes back of their evening. Thank you all so much for coming along. I hope it's been a useful session for you. If you have other questions that you would like to ask, please do email us at wp@sgul.ac.uk and we will endeavour to either give you a response or signpost you on to someone who might be able to answer your question. But we can't give you guidance on what specific questions may or may not be, so don't email those in. But if there's any kind of information, guidance or something you wanted to query from this evening's sessions, please do get in contact. Thank you so much to Elishbet and Zainab for supporting this evening and doing those practice questions. It's really helpful, I think, to see responses on what you can look to include and what a good answer can look like as well. And thank you to Kirsty as well for being in the Q&A in the chat there. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording and then I'm going to stop the session. So thank you all